990. Proverbs chapter 5, 990. And if we're all done tonight and you think to yourself, I'm not sure I really needed to hear that, or anybody here, I thought, it's entirely possible that could be the case. And if so, I thought, well, it's still okay, because perhaps there'll be an occasion somewhere down the road where you need to help somebody that does need to hear some of the things that we're talking about. And so in that regard, then we'll move ahead confidently that this is all going to be okay for this. I think I could confidently say that all of us at some point in our lives, many years ago for the first time, have heard the adage when we were little, sticks and stones break our bones, but words can never harm us. That might qualify as one of the single biggest untruths that we tell children. But I think the intent, of course, is that we're trying to help kids learn, or when somebody said that to me, trying to help me learn that since you can't control what other people say, then you can learn to not let those things be foremost in your mind. You can learn to ignore those things. But in reality, words do have a lot of power. They have power to build up, and they have power to tear down. That's just reality. And some of us, regarding words of other people, some of us have an incredible memory. We might forget where we leave our keys. We might forget the thing that we were supposed to do next Tuesday. But boy, do we remember what they said to us at that one. I just can't let that go. I get it. I can't say I'm not that way sometimes. But we do. Words are very impactful. They have a lot of power to build up and to tear down. They also have the power to lead astray if we're not on our guard. And tonight in the passage we're looking at, the sage addresses that issue, the power of words in this passage. Now, after reading the whole passage, you might think, well, I'm not sure the power of words is the main idea, but it is in there. So, the last two chapters have had an outline, so we'll deal with an outline here. But this is a different sort of an outline. Instead of a three-part outline, these verses, the middle verses, and the end verses, this has what is called a chiastic structure. Chi, C-H-I, is a Greek letter that we represent as X. So it has this X-shaped structure, which I've read that so many different times in commentaries and things like that. Honestly, it's an X shape in that it's the first part of the X. It's kind of like it doesn't have that part of the X or that part. It just kind of comes to a point and goes back. But they call it an X shape. So the other thing about these kinds of structures, you see these a lot in Hebrew scriptures. The outer elements, what will be at the top and the farthest over, those go together. And then these kind of go together. And then the ones in the middle kind of go together. They sort of echo one another in meaning, things like that. So in the first section is verses 1 and 2. And we might just call that pay attention to wisdom. Verses 1 and 2, pay attention to wisdom. The next bit, verses 3 through 6, is because getting involved with another woman is fatal. Because getting involved with another woman is fatal. The third section is verses 7 through 14. Avoid adultery because of the disaster it leads to. Avoid adultery because of the disaster it leads to. And then the next section, 15 through 19, instead, be faithful because of the satisfaction it brings. I'll go over all these again in a minute. And then the next one, verse 20. So why get involved with another woman? So why get involved with another woman? It's verse 20. And then verse 21 through 23. Thus, avoid stupidity.
What was that last word?
Stupidity. So the first section, pay attention to wisdom. That's 1 and 2. That's sort of mirror image, or the echoing of that is thus avoid stupidity, verses 21, 23. The second one, verses 3 through 6, because getting involved with another woman is fatal. Look down verse 20. So why get involved with another woman? And then the middle ones, 7 through 14, avoid adultery because of the disaster it leads to, and instead be faithful because of the satisfaction it brings, 15 through 19. Okay? So as we look at these passages tonight, we should keep in mind that throughout the Old Testament, not just in Exodus chapter 20, adultery is always seen as a grievous sin. It's just always seen as a terrible thing. The breaking of the marriage covenant is so serious that that is the exact image that's often used to describe unfaithfulness to God. There you read a lot of passages in the prophets that use very picturesque language that would make us uncomfortable to read out loud in a group about sexual infidelity being this picture of being unfaithful to God. So if that's the case, if breaking of that marriage covenant is often used to describe unfaithfulness to God, well then we could say that a good marriage then could be seen as a metaphor for the Christian's relationship to God, what it should be. A good marriage is a picture of a good relationship to God. And, that is true even when it's a good marriage between two people that don't care anything about God. Because all truth is God's truth, and there are times when people unwittingly reflect His principles in their life. And so this is an area where you could easily make the case that even if you didn't care anything about God, your life will be way better if you get this part right. If you get this thing right with your marriage relationship, your life will be better. It just will. So with that in mind, let's look at the first bit now. And actually I'm going to read down to verse 6. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Lend your ear to my understanding, that you may preserve discretion and your lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of an immoral woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lay hold of hell. Lest you ponder her path of life, her ways are unstable. You do not know them. So the sage here, the wisdom writer, the speaker of the Proverbs, the sage in the role of a father is definitely in a position to have something to say to the son who's either not yet begun his married life or is just at the beginning of it. The person that has walked that path for years and decades is better placed to have an opinion about how things ought to be, and certain things to watch out for, and certain things to be careful of, and certain things, do these kinds of things, don't do those kinds of things. And so we see that the Father is, again, here exhorting the Son, as we saw last week and the week before, I think, not just to hear, but to listen. Or, don't just listen, hear. In other words, we want the words to hit you and then go in. I have told kids before on various occasions, when they weren't paying attention to what I was telling them, I've said, I have discovered your superpower. You're impervious to instruction. Like bullets bouncing off Superman, my words bounced right off of you. They didn't soak in at all. I said it today. I didn't say that, but I said today to some kids after I'd said what we're doing, and then it's a big train wreck, and I said, listen to the words I'm speaking. That's what this guy's saying. Listen to what I'm telling you. And then pause for effect. Listen to what I am telling you. These are important things. And the reason that he's telling him, or the goal of all this, is to preserve discretion. To preserve discretion, which I think would easily be seen as a synonym for wisdom. Verse 2, verse 1, my son, pay attention to my wisdom, lend your ear to my understanding, listen to the words I'm speaking, that you may preserve discretion, and your lips may keep knowledge. Notice also that second bit there, that the son is implored that his lips keep knowledge. This is in contrast to what he's getting ready to say. He wants his son to keep knowledge. You could easily substitute the word wisdom there. It won't damage the meaning behind it. To keep knowledge on your lips. In other words, this woman, this immoral woman, her lips drip honey. In other words, she is a sweet talker. She's a conniver. She's speaking in a certain way to gain a desired result. She is a flatterer. She's a schmoozer. It's not real. It's not what you think. It's in contrast to what he's telling the son. Knowledge, wisdom, that's what you want on your lips. I had a friend at Olivet that was a flatterer. I loved him. He was a roommate of mine one year. I didn't have a problem with him, but he was a flatterer. And I had, you know me, I'm like, I have a burden for the truth. Like, I have to be careful that I don't say the truth when the truth isn't necessary. Not that I would say falsehoods, but I'll give you an example. He and I are eating lunch in the cafeteria one day, and a girl that we both knew came walking in. And as soon as I saw her, don't judge me, it's a story. As soon as I saw her, I thought to myself, well, what happened to you? Obviously didn't get up in time to get, do the whole bit. She didn't look very good. At the exact same moment I thought all that, my friend's like, hey, you're looking good today. And I don't know if I jerked my head to look at him, but I'm sorry, his lips weren't like speaking knowledge at that point. I mean, it's nice, but it's just a flat lie. I mean, he wasn't trying to get something from her. He was just that guy. He just was always, but yeah, don't be that. What this woman is saying sounds good, but it doesn't end up good. It leads to bitterness and death. It says, the lips of an immoral woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. She's oily. She's unctuous. Verse 5, let's see, I want to see it in here. The lips, okay, so in the New King James, it translates it immoral woman. In here, it translates it as an adulteress. And we'll come back to that in a minute. So it seems good. She's smooth. She's got the delivery. But in the end, and not till the end in a lot of cases, you don't know it till the end. Bitter as wormwood. Wormwood was a plant that was, it had some medicinal uses, but it was really bitter. If you taste it, it was really bitter. And not only that, in the end, she is sharp as a two-edged sword. It's dangerous. There's pain involved in these words. The sage is instructing here that if adultery is an offense against God, and it is, if it's an offense against God, it's foolish to think that you can go that way and come out the other side and not be affected. It's just foolish to think that. Do we see that around us today? Do we see people around us that think they can do this and come out the other side and not have a problem? Yes. Yes, we do. Because there's a lot of sin in the world, and there's also an awful lot of foolishness. There just is. Have you ever known someone? Clearly, I'm not asking for an example. Have you ever known someone that cheated on their wife or their husband? I've seen that a couple times at schools that I've worked at. What I find fascinating is that it seems the reality of seeing it work out, seeing the lead up to it, seeing the thing, the fallout from it. The reality is one way, and it's like so different than I might have imagined. I mean, when you watch TV, or you watch movies, or read certain books, adultery is often seen as like the answer to problems. And yet, in reality, it doesn't seem that works out that way. In those stories that we might encounter in media, an uninspiring marriage, well, the answer is adultery. Or, let alone a bad marriage. Those things are problems to be solved, and the solution in those stories generally starts with infidelity. And yet, not always. Sometimes they show some reality in what happens. But a lot of times, it works out quite well. I like them, I can't say I liked it. I enjoyed a lot of the movie Joaquin Phoenix. It was about Johnny Cash.
Walk the Line.
Walk the Line. What really bugged me about that movie is the whole storyline of him like shucking off his wife so he could be with June Carter. They kind of play it like, well, his first wife, she was like, clearly you're not supposed to feel that sorry for her. June Carter was a lot nicer. Whatever anybody else thinks of that movie or thinks of that story or thinks of any of that, I'm pretty sure I know what God thought of it. It was wrong. It shouldn't have been done that way. That shouldn't have happened. But our problem is that society is under the impression that our happiness is like the ultimate concern. Our ultimate concern is that we got to have happiness. Is that God's way? It's silly to even ask the question. I'm sure that I suppose there have been movies with this premise, but wouldn't that sort of be like somebody that has money trouble? Just can't quite get their bills paid every month. And so their solution is, well, first thing we need to do is put on a bandana and let's go knock off a liquor store. The wise person would say, time out. Let's workshop this just a minute. Let's think about this. Is it possible that if you go knock off the liquor store, you might have a new set of problems? Or, I'm just having all sorts of relationship problems. There's a person at work and, man, they're making it hard on me at work. They're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing the other. I think I just need to kill them. That might solve one set of problems, but I think it's going to initiate a new set of problems. And we laugh because it seems ridiculous, but could I point out to you, of the 10 commandments, the first 4 have to do with God, the other 6 have to do with people. Of the other 6, I just mentioned to you, one of them was stealing, one of them is murder, one of them is adultery. If somebody's like, I'm kind of digging that other woman, I'm going to get, there's a lot of people that would be like, well, I get it. That wouldn't think that if you said you're going to go kill somebody. Well, let's look at the next section, verse 7. Therefore, and always in Scripture and in English language in general, the word therefore reminds us of what we've just read. All of that in mind, now think about this. Therefore, hear me now, my children, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Again, listen to the words I'm speaking. Remove your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others and your years to the cruel one, lest aliens be filled with your wealth and your labors go to the house of a foreigner. And you mourn at last when your flesh and your body are consumed, and say, how I have hated instruction, and my heart despised correction. I've not obeyed the voice of my teachers, nor inclined my ear to those who instructed me. I was on the verge of total ruin in the midst of the assembly and congregation. So after that first bit, the sage here in verse 7 says, with all that in mind, now get this. And by the way, throughout this chapter, and probably the vast majority of the book of Proverbs in general, the instructions given to a son are just as applicable to a daughter. I mentioned on Sunday, when Paul talked about being a son, I said that really did mean son, because it was talking about inheritance and things like that. This doesn't mean that. The reason it's always directed toward the son is that one use for the book of Proverbs back in those days, one use for Proverbs in general like this, was to instruct young men that were entering public service. Like if they were going to be in the government or in the bureaucracy of civil life, they would be taught with these sorts of proverbs. And so the daughters weren't entering that life, and so that's why they always say son. It could be son or daughter, gender unspecific at this point. And therefore, all of the illustrations could be flipped. It could be the immoral man instead of the immoral woman. I would like to take a moment at this point to contrast the sage's advice from what we've just read for just a moment with pop culture's take on how things work. Anybody here familiar with the musical Bye Bye Birdie? Some of you? Okay. Bye Bye Birdie is a story of an Elvis-type character who at the beginning of the story, and it takes place like in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s. At the beginning of the story, Conrad Birdie, the Elvis-type character, is going into the army, and they have a contest, nationwide contest among teeny boppers for a date or like a kiss with him before he goes. That's the beginning premise of this musical. Musicals, I'm going to go ahead and just be like offensive to a certain number of people. Musicals are like junior high girls volleyball. There's really good ones, and there's really bad ones, and there's just not much in between. It's just the case. It's just the way. This one is actually not a bad musical. It's got a lot of great moments. The movie version of it has Illinois' own Dick Van Dyke. He's it's got a lot of nice moments. But get this. Here's a story, or here's a song where the lead character, Conrad Birdie, and the lead female character, a teenager in the story, sing this song. And the song is called Got a Lot of Living to Do. Got a lot of living to do. Here's some of the lyrics. I'll read you some of what he says and then some of what she says. He starts off, there are chicks just ripe for some kissing. And I mean to kiss me a few. Man, those chicks don't know what they're missing. I got a lot of living to do. Sizzling steaks all around for tasting, and there's Cadillacs all shiny and new. Gotta move, 'cause time is a-wasting. I got a lot of living to do. There's music to play, places to go, people to see, everything for you and me. Life's a ball if only you know it, and it's all just waiting for you. You're alive, so come on and show it. We got a lot of living to do. So far, so whatever. Here's the girl's verse. There are men with childhood behind them, handsome men. And now there's a line here I'm going to editorialize. The songwriters tried to think of the absolute ends of the spectrum of education. All the way great on one side to the most abysmal example possible on the other side, so that you get the idea of this vast continuum. Okay, so here's the line. There are men with childhood behind them, handsome men from Yale or Purdue. I didn't write it. This is the words. Older men, and I'm going to find them. I got a lot of living to do. I'm going to have fun, going to be wild, have my own way. I may break a heart today. Drink champagne as if it were water, pink champagne. And after a few, Daddy dear, you won't know your daughter. She's got a lot of living to do. I can tell you that song, musically, it's a catchy tune. The musical, like I said, it's pretty enjoyable on the whole. But do you see the contrast between the world's way of thinking and what the sages say? According to these songwriters, the thing that carousing and serial relationships and drinking and carrying on, what that does, all of those things, what they do is they add life. They add life to you. I got a lot of living to do, so I need to go do all these things. They add to my experience. If you need to know how to live, here's a list. See, but what does the sage teach us? And by the way, this is an example of why some people don't like the Bible. Because the sage says, those kinds of things, those very kinds of things, they don't add life to you. They take life from you. Which is to say, they bring death to you. They aren't things that, like, they all look shiny. They all look appealing. They all got their thing. It's a catchy tune. It seems like it might be cool. It seems like it might feel good. It seems like, but they bring death. And the sage is pretty straight up about it. He doesn't like mince words. Death to a lot of things. They bring death to your honor. They bring death to years of life. They bring death to your bank account. They bring death to your physical body, which may be, according to the verse here, when your flesh and your body are consumed, it might be talking about like a sexually transmitted disease. I mean, it could be. But can that be right? Because it seems like I haven't seen that on all the TV shows that much. But would you like to know where you can see all those sorts of death kinds of results? where all those things are available to be viewed. I can tell you one place you can see it, in and around school. Yep. One thing I realized a long time ago when I was early in my teaching career, trying to understand why the kids I was working with just didn't quite understand me. What I came to realize is one day I could take you to the building where I was. I could take you to the spot in the hallway when this dawned on me. I was walking down the hall toward my room, and all at once, I don't know if I stopped, but I was like, okay. What I came to realize is that I was the weird one. I was expecting them to understand me, and I was trying to understand them based on my experience. They didn't have that experience. A lot of them didn't. Not none, but a lot of them didn't. See, I grew up with a mom and a dad. I never once saw my mom and dad fight. I saw them disagree on some things. The only time a door ever slammed in my house, I almost got beat for doing it. It wasn't mom or dad, it was me. I shut that door. I was upset, and I was a senior by the time this happened. I shut that door and I heard it hit, and I was like, and I was just like waiting. Tick, tick, tick. There comes the door open again. Now, I never saw that happen with them. I never wondered where my dad was because he hadn't come home after work. Never once. Then I started. I was married, and my wife and I and our kids sat down for supper every night, virtually without fail. Many of the kids at school, and fewer all the time, or more of them all the time, sorry, I should say, they don't have any idea what that might be like. And the reason they don't have an idea is because their parents have let them down. It's just the case. You might have wondered if I, as a teacher, or if teachers in general, ever if the teaching itself ever just elicits really strong emotions from the teacher, do you ever just really get mad at what's going on at school? Yeah, every once in a while I had gotten upset with students over misbehavior or being a constant pain. Sure. But not that often. But what did really elicit strong emotions in me was seeing kids' lives daily destroyed by the pathetic way their parents operated. That really upset me. They were suffering because mom or dad are just too busy still chasing their own dreams. When the kid should have been at home having a mother mothering him, well, that wasn't going to happen because mom's out looking for love in all the wrong places. This is the reality. This is the way it is in many people's lives. The sage is instructing that the one involved in adultery is preparing to give away so many things that should be their own, and they're going to give them away to others. Verse 10, for example, lest aliens be filled with your wealth and your labors go to the house of a foreigner. Can you see how the idea of somebody paying child support for long term, your wealth is given to others because you thought it'd be a good idea and it wasn't. The gaining of wisdom takes time. It's not something that you can cram for. You can't be a fool one day and be like, okay, I'm going to stay up all night. See, if it takes all night, I'm going to be wise tomorrow. You might be wiser, but if you start off a fool, you ain't going to be that wise by tomorrow. It takes time. It takes a long time. Strength is also like that. If someone wants to develop their body, it takes years of dedication, so I'm told. It's like not an overnight thing. I got to be buff by tomorrow. Well, you ain't going to be buff by tomorrow. To develop wealth, unless you're born into real riches, the accumulation of earthly goods, it takes time. Over time, it can happen. A reputation is the result of years of effort. But all of those things that take a great deal of time to gain, all of them can be lost in an instant. That's why the sage is saying to the son and to us, be careful. He's not even saying be careful. He's saying, listen, dude, stay away from there. You know this is that's being offered up there. Don't go that way. Avoid that house. Avoid that place. Don't be around it. Verse 15, drink water from your own cistern and running water from your own well. Should your fountains be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be only your own and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of your youth. As a loving deer and a graceful doe, let her breast satisfy you at all times and always be enraptured with her love. The sage up till now has worked to paint this frightening picture. Infidelity is nothing to be played around with. There are real life and death consequences to it. Now, he turns to the admonition. He uses positive images to teach the same point. And to make that point, he contrasts this immoral woman. The NIV says adulteress. Some versions, I think maybe King James, says the alien woman, foreign woman. Some people get hung up on that as though it's some sort of like racial thing. It's not. Any woman other than my wife, if I'm going to start thinking of that woman in ways I should only be thinking about my wife, that woman is foreign to me. She is alien to me. She's other because she's supposed to be other. There's some things that are only, for one other person. So that's what's going on there. This the contrast he makes is that the alien woman drips honey from her mouth. She uses words to seduce and ultimately to entrap. Have you ever been seduced? Yes, you have actually. I'll answer for you. You have. Because, all of you have, because that is exactly what the devil does. The devil is always seducing. He's always dripping honey. He's always painting a better picture about what he's got on offer than what the reality of it is. He'll tell you that there's a price to pay, but it's not that much. No, it's always more. Always, the price is always more than you thought. You will never experience buyer's remorse more than when you buy Satan's lies. If honey drips from the mouth of the alien woman, what about the wife? Well, the image he uses here is water. And he talks about running water. So, water that stays sweet. If you were reading a Western cowboy book, sometimes they're out in they find water and they say it's sweet, it's running. It is good to drink. And the reason it's good is because it is running. It is moving. There's life in it. The sage said that the point of the first one was that adultery brings death. Well, running water is a life-giving metaphor. So honey was a metaphor. She's not really dripping honey out of her mouth. That would not necessarily be alluring. Like you got a little something, right? No, it's just like the water is a metaphor, life-giving, okay? Faithfulness in marriage is a life-giving affair. There's some discussion about physical relationships with married people and how marriage is the sole approved venue for sex. Sex isn't the point of the chapter any more than sex is the point of marriage. It's a part of it. It's a gift, but it's not the point. That's the place where so many people in our world go wrong today, is that they've made sex the God. It is the ultimate good that they can think of. And so they chase after that. And they end up in a great King James word, dissipation. It's not good. Thinking that way should cause us to kind of loop back to that previous section and think of all the bad situations that could come up. In the previous chapter, in chapter 4, we talked about keeping the heart, for out of it spring the issues of life. And we learned that to keep the heart We hold on to wisdom. We keep hold of wisdom, even and especially in the face of temptation. The sage would have us to know and remember that to keep wisdom is to keep all that you have and to gain more. To lose wisdom, or to just throw it away, is to lose everything else as well. The ultimate goal of a wise life is illustrated in this chapter as faithfulness to one's spouse. The ultimate goal of a wise life is illustrated as faithfulness to a spouse. Faithfulness to the spouse is not the ultimate goal in life. It is an illustration of the ultimate goal, that wisdom. That faithfulness to your spouse then becomes, in that way, a picture or an illustration of a witness of faithfulness to God. A person that's been married as long as many of you have, is not, the reason it happened is not because each of you hit life's lottery and found the other person whom not a living soul alive, you or anybody else, could ever have an unkind word about. No, that's not the way that works. The reason you have this long-standing relationship is because you realize that commitment trumps feeling. And when we're talking about a relationship with God, commitment should trump feeling there too. Because sometimes God doesn't give us what we ask for. Sometimes He doesn't heal us. For the life of me, I can't understand why God doesn't heal Kathy. I can't think of one good reason why. I'll just be honest with you. But I didn't enter the relationship for what I could get out of God. I'm committed to Him. I'm committed to Rachel. And my commitment is on the days, vastly more than not, when she's awesome and I have no problem, can't even think of a problem. And then on the other days, I'm still committed to her. Clearly, she feels that way. I mean, that's why we're still together. This goes contrary to today's views of life. We're led to believe that personal fulfillment is the ultimate goal. I found a quote. I don't know who the man is. His name is Lewis Smedes. He said, "Our culture typically tells us to define our lives in terms of present needs and future possibilities, not commitments we have made in the past." That's as true as can be. People are like, what? Things are different now. Doesn't matter. We covered that in the better, worse, richer, poorer, sickness, health. We covered that. There wasn't anything left out. There wasn't an escape clause. Not in ours, not in the wedding we had. It's easy to find support for the idea that you should be happy. The next post I see on some social media part that somebody puts like the hashtag self-care. Gag. I'm just going to tell you right now, we aren't a bunch of people. I don't mean just in this room. We aren't a bunch of people that are lacking in self-care. I mean, the number of people that put stuff on about, I just had to have a self-care day. Okay, whatever. How's that different from 90% of the rest of your days? It's not like you're Mother Teresa out there in the streets of Calcutta every day helping everybody else. And the last time I checked, I never saw Mother Teresa have a self-care day. Good grief. I'm just so over that. I'm so over that kind of thing. I believe in working to make what we have better. We make what we have better. I'm just not happy in my relationship. I have a plan for you. Work to make it better. Go and find something else. I don't know about you. I've invested almost 40 years of my life getting Rachel as good as she is. I do not have another 40 years to find somebody else and train them.
I've trained her for 50 years. I can't do no more.
I'm like, why would I go looking somewhere else? But people do. guarantee you that it is less work with a far bigger payoff to cultivate new and better relationships with the one you're with. Rachel and I have a disagreement about a Stephen Stills song. She rolls her eyes every time it comes on, and I actually like the song. If you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. Now, from one point of view, see, Rachel's point of view is that's terrible because it's like infidelity. No, because I think maybe he's written that from a viewpoint of, some might say I made a mistake. No, I don't think I made a mistake. But some might say the person made a mistake in their relationship and now they're in this one. But they see that one. Yeah, well, you need to love the one you're with. I think that's good theology, actually. You can disagree with me. It's okay. I'm pretty firm in my opinions most of the time. At least as far as I don't wilt when somebody disagrees with me. You can disagree. You can tell me why you disagree. I won't be upset.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cultivate a better relationship. Part of that cultivation of a better relationship, part of it is control. Not controlling your spouse. Controlling yourself. In my career, I worked mostly, in my teaching career, I worked mostly with women. I can't tell you how many times I heard different ones refer to themselves as some other male teacher's work wife. That reminds me of Kenny Loggins. Yeah. Highway to the danger zone. Don't do that stuff. You should not be playing around. Words matter. You can't do that. Just like Rachel and I, before we ever got married, we made an agreement with one another. We're never going to talk about, we're never going to consider for real. We're never going to have a consideration. We're never going to talk about it. We're never going to joke about divorce or breaking up. Never. The closest we ever do is every once in a while I'll tell Rachel, if you ever leave me, I'm coming with you.
Amen. That's right.
That's the closest we ever come to it. Because that stuff's not harmless. I guess you might be able to play with gasoline and matches and not burn down the neighborhood. But I'm here to tell you, if tragedy strikes and the houses are burned and people are dead and you're standing there with the book of matches and the can of gas, who's going to be blamed? It's all going to be on you. And we have some control over some of these issues. And the sage would tell us, you got more control. You got enough control. And especially with God's help, we certainly have enough control. Like I said, if none of that is meaningful to you personally, maybe someday you'll be able to share it with someone else. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, thank you for your word to us tonight. Help us. Well, first of all, Lord, thank you for so many in this room that is like, they've done it. They're like on the long, long haul in their relationship. And we thank you, Lord, and that's just such a witness. And we thank you for your working in our lives. And Lord, we thank you more than all of that we can have a relationship with you. Because we know that's what's the most important thing, that relationship with you. And we just praise you for that, Lord, that you keep us and work with us and pull us along and make us better. Help us to stay closer to you, Lord. We ask in your name. Thanks for coming tonight.